The restaurant was softly lit, the kind of place where quiet music played in the background and people spoke in low, polite voices. The sound of clinking glasses and faint laughter floated through the air, while the smell of freshly baked bread and roasted garlic filled the room. Among the staff weaving between tables was a young woman named Lena. She moved quickly with practiced grace, carrying trays that seemed too heavy for her small frame. Her eyes carried a quiet tiredness, but she always smiled when she spoke to customers. It wasn't just part of her job, it was who she was. It had been a long evening, and Lena was working her third double shift that week. Her sneakers were old and worn down, and her hands carried small burns from hot plates. But she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Her rent was due in 2 days, and her mother's medication bill was waiting at home on the kitchen table. Every tip mattered. At table 7 sat a group of well-dressed men and women. Their laughter was louder than the rest, their watches shining under the dim lights. They were the kind of people who didn't look at price tags or check their bank balances. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes and an expensive suit, seemed to command the group's attention. He was older, confident, and spoke with the tone of someone used to being obeyed. His name was Charles, and though Lena didn't know it yet, he would soon change her life. When Lena approached their table with their orders, Charles glanced up from his drink. "You work fast," he said with a polite smile. "How long have you been here?" "Almost a year now," she replied, setting down their plates carefully. "A year? You must like it here then." His tone was teasing, almost playful. Lena forced a small smile. "It pays the bills." One of the women at the table laughed lightly. "Oh, come on, there must be more to you than serving food." Lena froze for a second. She didn't want to talk about herself. But before she could change the subject, another man leaned in and said, "Didn't one of the waiters say you used to play piano?" Her stomach turned. She hadn't touched a piano in years, but word had gotten around after one of her coworkers had seen an old photo on her phone. "I used to," she said quietly, keeping her tone polite. "Not anymore." Charles raised a brow, clearly intrigued. "Used to? What happened?" She gave a small shrug. "Life happened." Her answer made him smile in a way that wasn't unkind but curious. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on the table. Then after a brief silence he said, "There's a piano right there, isn't there?" He nodded toward the corner of the restaurant, where a glossy black piano sat under soft light, mostly unused except on weekends when a hired musician played. Lena looked at it for a moment. The sight of it made her chest tighten. She hadn't gone near one since her mother had fallen ill. Music used to be her dream, but now it was a reminder of everything she had lost. "I don't play anymore," she said, hoping that would end the conversation. But Charles didn't stop. "Come on, just one song. You look like someone who's hiding talent. It would be a shame not to share it." A few of the other guests at nearby tables turned their heads, curious about the conversation. The air shifted. Lena could feel the attention slowly focusing on her. Her hands went cold. "I really can't," she insisted, but her voice trembled slightly. It wasn't fear of playing. It was fear of feeling again. Charles smiled, but there was challenge in his tone. "Tell you what, if you play, I'll double your tip tonight." The people at his table laughed softly, thinking it was all in good fun. But to Lena, it didn't feel like a game. The idea of playing in front of strangers terrified her, not because she wasn't good enough, but because it meant reopening a door she had closed long ago. "Please, sir," she said quietly. "I'd rather not." Her manager, who had overheard, came over with an encouraging smile. "Lena, maybe you should. Just one song. It might be good for business." That didn't help. She felt trapped between her boss's hopeful look and Charles's confident smirk. Everyone was watching now. Even the bartender had stopped wiping glasses. For a few seconds, she stood frozen in place. Her throat felt dry, her palms damp. Then something inside her shifted. A quiet voice that whispered, "What do you have to lose?" She nodded slowly. "All right," she said softly, placing her tray on the counter. "Just one song." Charles smiled, clearly pleased with himself. "That's the spirit." As she walked toward the piano, the noise of the restaurant faded. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her heart pounded in her chest and her thoughts tangled together. She hadn't practiced in years. Her fingers might not remember. What if she made a fool of herself? When she reached the piano, she stood for a moment staring at it. The polished surface reflected her nervous face. She ran her fingers lightly across the keys, feeling the cool smoothness beneath her touch. It felt both familiar and distant, like visiting a childhood home after many years. She took a seat. The bench creaked softly under her weight. The chatter behind her faded until the only sound she heard was the quiet hum of the ceiling fan. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the keys. She wasn't sure what she would play. Not one of the complicated pieces she used to perform. Something simple, something her mother loved. She closed her eyes and let her fingers find the melody on their own. At first, the notes were uneven, shaky, like a voice long forgotten, but slowly they began to flow together. Her hands remembered more than she expected. The music filled the room, soft but steady, rising and falling like waves. The noise of forks and glasses had stopped. Conversations had paused. Every eye in the restaurant was on her. Her co-workers stood frozen behind the counter, watching with wide eyes. The laughter that had filled the place earlier was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost sacred. Even Charles had stopped smiling. He sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable as the melody washed over him. Lena's mind drifted back to the nights when she used to play for her mother. Those were the happiest moments. Before the hospital visits, before the bills, before she had to trade piano keys for serving trays. Each note carried a memory, a piece of herself she thought she had buried. She could feel her emotions building with the music. Sadness, longing, love, all of it poured into the song. Her hands moved with confidence now, no longer uncertain. The music wasn't just sound anymore. It was her story. When the final note faded, there was a silence so deep it felt unreal. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, people began to clap. It started softly, one pair of hands, then another, until the entire restaurant erupted in applause. Some even stood up. Lena sat there stunned, her hands still resting on the keys. Charles rose from his seat. His face, once full of amusement, now looked different, softer, almost emotional. He walked toward her, and the crowd parted quietly to let him through. That, he said, his voice low but clear, was extraordinary. Lena blinked, still in disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure of what else to say. He nodded slowly, looking at the piano, then back at her. "You shouldn't be serving tables," he said. "You should be performing." Before she could respond, her manager stepped in, smiling proudly. "I told you she was talented." Charles turned to him briefly, then back to Lena. "I'm hosting a charity event next month. We could use someone like you. Think about it." He handed her his business card before returning to his table. The applause slowly faded, replaced by quiet murmurs of amazement. People were still looking at her, whispering, pointing. But this time she didn't feel embarrassed. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. When her shift ended that night, Lena changed into her old jacket and stepped out into the cool night air. She held the business card in her hand, staring at the name printed on it. The streets were quiet, the glow of the restaurant fading behind her. For the first time in a long time, she smiled to herself. Maybe, she thought, this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was just beginning. The next morning, Lena woke to the sound of birds chirping outside her small apartment window. The sunlight was soft, slipping through the thin curtains and casting a warm glow across the room. She stretched, feeling the tension in her shoulders from the long shift the night before. Her eyes fell on the business card still lying on the nightstand, and a small smile tugged at her lips. She picked it up and read the name again. Charles Devon, charity organizer, millionaire businessman. It felt unreal, like a dream she couldn't quite touch. For breakfast, she made a simple cup of tea and buttered toast. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured the tea, a mix of nerves and excitement bubbling inside her. The idea of performing at a charity event for people she had only just met seemed terrifying, yet thrilling. She couldn't help but think of her mother, how proud she would have been to hear her play again, to see her confidence return. Lena had spent so long putting her dreams aside, focusing only on survival, that the thought of stepping back into the world of music seemed almost impossible. Despite her hesitation, she couldn't ignore the tiny spark of hope igniting in her chest. She knew she had talent, she had always known it, and last night had reminded her that it wasn't gone. She could still touch hearts with her music, still create moments that made people pause and feel something deep inside. Lena sipped her tea slowly, savoring the warmth and letting her thoughts wander. Later that morning, she arrived at the restaurant, feeling the familiar hum of activity as chefs shouted orders and waiters moved briskly through the dining area. Her co-workers greeted her with smiles, some of them still talking about her performance from the night before. Whispers of amazement followed her as she carried trays, but Lena kept her head down, focusing on her work. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to figure out what came next. During a brief break, Lena found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone. She reread the message Charles had sent the night before, confirming the charity event details. The venue was luxurious, filled with people who would expect a flawless performance. Her heart raced at the thought. Could she rise to the occasion? Would her hands remember the melodies and emotions that had flowed so naturally just hours ago? The questions crowded her mind, but she pushed them aside, reminding herself that she had faced challenges before and had come through stronger. As the day went on, Lena noticed something changing inside her. The fear that had gripped her was gradually giving way to a quiet determination. She couldn't let this opportunity pass by, not if it could bring her back to the world she loved. She decided to practice, even if only for a few minutes, on the small keyboard she kept tucked away in her apartment. She knew it wouldn't be the same as a grand piano, but it would be enough to reconnect with her hands, to find the rhythm and confidence she would need. Back at her apartment that evening, Lena set up the keyboard on a small table by the window. She took a deep breath, letting her fingers hover over the keys. The first notes were hesitant, each one measured and careful, as if testing the waters. But as she continued, a familiar warmth spread through her hands and the music began to flow. She played a piece her mother loved, a simple melody filled with gentle arcs and soft transitions. With every note, Lena felt herself healing, her confidence returning in small, steady increments. Time passed quickly, and before she knew it, the evening had grown quiet outside. Lena sat back from the keyboard, her hands resting lightly on the keys. She felt tired, but in a way that was satisfying, not exhausting. It was the kind of tired that came from doing something meaningful, something that mattered. Her mind raced with ideas for the charity performance, imagining the audience, the lights, and the grand piano she would soon sit before again. She realized that last night had been just the beginning, a spark that had awakened her dormant passion. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Lena balanced her shifts at the restaurant with practicing her pieces, each moment filled with focus and dedication. She discovered that her fingers remembered more than she had thought. The music flowed naturally, though she still spent time perfecting transitions and dynamics. The anticipation of performing in front of an audience beyond the restaurant both excited and terrified her. Every night she rehearsed, visualizing the room filled with people, imagining their reactions and the emotions she wanted to convey. Her co-workers noticed the change in her. She walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and carried herself with a quiet grace that had been absent before. Some of them asked questions, curious about the event, and Lena answered carefully, not wanting to reveal too much. But inside she felt a growing sense of purpose. For the first time in years, she felt as if she were moving towards something important, something that mattered beyond survival and daily routines. One afternoon, as Lena was finishing her shift, her manager approached her with a serious expression. "Lena, I just got a call from Charles Devon. He wants to meet you tomorrow for a brief rehearsal at the venue. He says it's important for you to get familiar with the piano and the space." Lena felt a surge of nerves and excitement. This was it, a step closer to the stage, a step closer to the life she had dreamed of before responsibilities had pulled her away. "I understand," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The next day she arrived at the venue, a grand hall with polished floors and tall ceilings. Chandeliers hung overhead, casting a warm glow, and the room was filled with the faint scent of flowers and polished wood. The grand piano stood at the center of the stage, gleaming under the lights. Lena approached it cautiously, her heart pounding. She sat down on the bench and ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the familiar texture and weight beneath her hands. Charles stood nearby, observing her silently. "Take your time," he said finally. "There's no rush." Lena closed her eyes and began to play. The first notes were steady, careful, but as she continued, the music gained momentum. Her fingers danced across the keys, each movement confident and deliberate. She could feel the space around her, the resonance of the piano and the sound of the notes filling the hall. For a moment, it was just her and the music, a perfect connection that made the rest of the world disappear. When she finished, Charles approached, clapping softly. "That was remarkable," he said. I think the audience will feel the same way. You have something very special." Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief and pride. She had feared failure, feared embarrassment. But standing there, hearing his words, she felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in years. The music wasn't just notes on a page anymore. It was a bridge to her past, her dreams, and her future. Over the following days, Lena continued her preparation, each practice session building her confidence and skill. She thought often of her mother, imagining her watching from somewhere, smiling and proud. She began to believe that this opportunity wasn't just a chance to perform, but a chance to reclaim a part of herself she had almost lost. Each day brought her closer to the moment when she would step onto the stage, facing an audience for the first time in years, and share her music with the world. The week leading up to the charity event passed in a blur for Lena. Each day was a careful balance between her restaurant shifts, her practice sessions, and the quiet moments of reflection she allowed herself in the small hours of the night. Every evening she would return to her apartment, exhausted yet energized, her mind replaying each note, each melody, each emotion she wanted to convey. The fear that had once held her back now coexisted with a growing sense of purpose. On one of her breaks at the restaurant, she found herself standing near the window, watching the city bustle below. The streets were alive with people going about their daily lives, unaware of the small apartment above them where a young woman was preparing to step back into the world she had once loved. Lena felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. The thought of performing in front of a large audience, in a space far grander than the restaurant where she had first shared her music, made her stomach flutter. Her co-workers had noticed the change in her demeanor. She moved with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Some asked questions, curious about the event, and she answered carefully without giving away too much of her nerves. She didn't want to seem unsure. She wanted to appear ready. Inside, though, her mind raced with questions and doubts. Would the audience like her music? Would she remember every note perfectly? Would she falter in front of all those eyes? The day of the rehearsal at the venue arrived. Lena stepped into the grand hall, feeling a wave of awe wash over her. The chandeliers sparkled like stars, and the polished floors reflected the soft light, giving the space an almost magical quality. The grand piano stood at the center, gleaming under the lights. Lena approached it slowly, taking in the details, the smooth surface of the keys, the subtle curves of the wood, the soft echo of the hall around her. Charles was already there, observing her quietly. He nodded as she took her seat on the bench. "Relax," he said. "Take your time and get used to the space." Lena closed her eyes and began to play. The first few notes were careful, tentative, but as her fingers moved across the keys, the music began to flow naturally. She could feel the resonance of the piano, the way the sound carried across the room, filling every corner. It was different from the restaurant, larger and more powerful, but she adapted quickly, letting the melody guide her. The notes rose and fell, carrying with them emotions she had kept buried for years. Each chord, each rhythm told a story of loss, resilience, and hope. When she finished, the hall was silent for a moment, as if the room itself had paused to absorb the music. Charles approached, clapping softly. "That was remarkable," he said. "You have a gift and people will feel it." Lena felt a surge of relief and pride. The validation of her talent, from someone she barely knew yet respected deeply, gave her confidence. She realized that she wasn't just performing notes. She was sharing a part of herself with the world. That thought both scared and thrilled her. It was vulnerable yet liberating. Over the next few days, Lena practiced tirelessly. Her apartment became a sanctuary of music. She would play for hours, letting her emotions pour into each note, perfecting every transition and nuance. Sometimes she would stop and close her eyes, imagining the audience's faces, their reactions, and the way the music would touch them. Other times she would record herself on her phone, listening critically to each playback, adjusting where needed. The process was exhausting, but each day she felt stronger, more prepared. Meanwhile, the restaurant carried on as usual. Lena continued to serve tables with the same grace and professionalism, but her mind was often elsewhere, running through melodies and imagining her performance. Her coworkers admired the dedication they saw in her, even if they didn't fully understand the depth of what she was preparing for. Some offered words of encouragement, reminding her that she had already amazed people once, that she could do it again. The night before the charity event, Lena sat by her apartment window staring out at the city lights. The grand piano at the venue, the audience, the chandeliers, it all felt so real now. Her fingers hovered over the small keyboard in her apartment, and she played softly, letting the music calm her nerves. She reminded herself that she had faced fear before, and had turned it into something beautiful. This was just another step, another challenge to overcome. Sleep came reluctantly that night. Her mind raced with images of the stage, the music, and the faces she would see. She imagined the applause, the moments of silence between pieces, the way her emotions would connect with the audience. Despite the anxiety, a quiet excitement grew inside her. This was her moment, a chance to reclaim a part of herself she had almost lost forever. The morning of the event arrived, bringing with it a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Lena dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made her feel both comfortable and elegant. She checked her reflection in the mirror multiple times, adjusting small details, making sure she was ready to face the world. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. She knew the audience would be larger than any she had ever played for, but she reminded herself that the music had always been her guide. Arriving at the venue, Lena was struck by the scale of the space. Volunteers bustled around, preparing decorations, setting up microphones, and arranging seating. The grandeur of the hall was intimidating but also inspiring. She approached the grand piano, her fingers brushing the keys lightly as she took her seat. The familiar weight of the keys beneath her hands was comforting, grounding her. Charles arrived shortly after, offering a reassuring smile. "You're ready," he said. "Just play from your heart. The rest will follow." Lena nodded, taking a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories of her mother, her past practice sessions, and her own resilience fill her mind. The music began softly, gradually building in strength and confidence. Her fingers moved fluidly, each note carrying emotion, each chord telling a story. She felt the room respond, even without seeing the audience. The resonance of the hall amplified the music, making it feel alive, almost as if it had a presence of its own. Time seemed to stretch and bend as she played. Lena was fully immersed, lost in the music, feeling every rise and fall, every tension and release. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only the piano, the melody, and the emotions she poured into each note. Her nervousness melted away, replaced by a deep sense of connection and purpose. This was where she belonged, and she knew it with every fiber of her being. When she finally finished, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, as if the audience was collectively holding its breath. Then applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and energy. Lena opened her eyes, seeing the faces of people moved by her performance, some smiling, some teary-eyed. Charles approached, clapping with genuine admiration. "That was incredible," he said. "You have touched everyone here. This is just the beginning." Lena felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. She had faced her fears, overcome her doubts, and shared her music with a room full of strangers who now felt connected to her story. The journey wasn't over, but this moment marked a significant step forward. She had rediscovered her confidence, her talent, and her passion. And as the applause continued, she realized that this was more than just a performance. It was a reclaiming of herself, a celebration of the strength and resilience she had nurtured over the years. The evening of the charity event arrived with a sense of electricity in the air. Lena stepped into the grand hall, her heart beating rapidly, every sound around her amplified by anticipation. The room was decorated with flowers, elegant table settings, and sparkling chandeliers that reflected the soft glow of the lights. Guests mingled in their formal attire, laughter and polite conversation filling the space, yet there was an underlying excitement as everyone awaited the highlight of the evening. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her dress, smoothing the fabric over her shoulders. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her, but also a quiet strength she had not felt in years. Her manager offered an encouraging nod from across the room, and she returned it with a small, grateful smile. Charles was already present, standing near the stage with a confident expression, giving her a reassuring glance. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had prepared for this moment, that every practice, every nervous night, and every day of doubt had led her here. When her cue came, Lena walked toward the grand piano. The audience's chatter faded as people took notice of her presence. She could feel their eyes on her, and for a brief moment her chest tightened with anxiety. But as she sat at the piano and let her fingers rest on the keys, a calm settled over her. The music was a familiar friend, a bridge connecting her past, present, and future. The first notes she played were soft, tentative, almost as if testing the waters. Yet as the melody developed, it grew richer and more confident. Lena's hands moved with a fluidity that told the story of years of practice and passion, even if those years had been interrupted. She poured herself into each chord, each note, allowing the audience to feel the emotions behind her music. There was sadness, longing, hope, and joy intertwined in every movement of her fingers across the keys. The audience became still, captivated by the purity and depth of her performance. Some leaned forward, eyes wide as though trying to absorb every nuance. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, transporting them into a world created by Lena alone. The room, filled with people who were accustomed to the ordinary luxuries of life, now held its breath, moved by something raw and profoundly human. Lena's thoughts drifted briefly to her mother, imagining her watching with a proud smile. Each note she played was a tribute, a way of connecting to the person who had inspired her love for music. She remembered the nights spent practicing in a dimly lit room, the hours spent perfecting every detail, and the sacrifices that had led her away from the piano for so long. Now all of it converged into this moment, this performance, and the power it held over everyone present. The music swelled, filling the hall with resonance and life. Lena lost herself in the sound, feeling every rise and fall, every pause and crescendo. Her fingers danced over the keys, each movement precise yet expressive, carrying the audience along with her. For those listening, it was impossible not to be affected. Some held back tears while others exchanged glances that spoke of shared wonder and awe. Lena could sense the collective heartbeat of the room, the way the music connected each person to the story she was telling. As the final section approached, Lena's hands moved with a confidence and grace that left no room for doubt. The melody reached its peak, a powerful culmination of emotion and skill. The notes lingered in the air, resonating with the hearts of those who listened. Time seemed suspended, the room entirely focused on her and the music that poured from the piano. Every chord struck with clarity, every passage infused with meaning, creating a moment that felt timeless. When the last note faded, silence reigned for a heartbeat. Then the audience erupted into applause, the sound swelling and echoing through the hall. It was not just polite clapping. It was genuine, heartfelt appreciation. People stood, some cheering, others whistling softly, their faces alight with amazement. Lena's chest heaved, her hands still resting lightly on the keys, overwhelmed by the intensity of the response. Charles moved forward, clapping along with the crowd, his eyes shining with admiration. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice carrying above the remaining applause. "You've touched everyone here tonight." Lena felt a mixture of relief and pride wash over her. She had faced her fears, stepped into the unknown, and shared a piece of herself with the world. Every doubt, every sleepless night, every moment of uncertainty had led to this instant. She realized that the music was more than notes and rhythm. It was her story, her voice, her courage manifested in sound. As the applause continued, Lena looked around the hall. Guests approached her, offering compliments and expressions of wonder. Some asked questions about her training, while others simply shook their heads in admiration, unable to find words. Her manager was beaming, clearly proud of her accomplishment, and Lena felt a warm glow of satisfaction. She had not only performed, she had connected, moved, and inspired. Later, during a brief intermission, Charles returned to her side. "You were magnificent," he said. "I knew you had talent, but I didn't expect the depth of emotion you conveyed. You have something rare." Lena smiled, a mix of humility and gratitude. "Thank you. I just wanted to play from the heart." He nodded, understanding her words. "And you did. That's what matters most. Talent without feeling can impress, but talent with feeling can move people. You've done both." As the evening progressed, Lena observed the audience. People who had come for a night of socializing were now quietly discussing the performance, still caught in the resonance of her music. Some sought her out during breaks to express how deeply they had been touched. The power of her performance extended beyond mere entertainment. It created a shared experience, a moment of human connection that lingered in the air. After the event, Lena returned to her apartment, exhausted but exhilarated. She sank into her chair, letting out a deep breath. Her fingers ached slightly from the intensity of the performance, but it was a pleasant ache, a reminder of the effort and emotion she had invested. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the long shifts at the restaurant, the private practice sessions, the doubts and fears she had overcome, and the quiet moments of self-discovery that had strengthened her resolve. For the first time in years, Lena felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with survival or necessity. It was about her passion, her dedication, and the impact she could have on others through her music. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was courage, perseverance, and the willingness to take risks that allowed her to share her gift with the world. As she lay down to rest that night, Lena thought about the future. The charity event had been just the beginning, a catalyst that opened doors she had long thought closed. Opportunities to perform, to grow, and to connect with others through music now seemed possible. She understood that the journey would not always be easy, that challenges would arise, and that fear would occasionally return. But she also knew that she had the strength to face them, to transform uncertainty into expression, and to let her music speak for her. In the quiet of her apartment, Lena closed her eyes with a smile. The echoes of the audience's applause still lingered in her mind, a reminder of what she had achieved and what was yet to come. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and an unwavering belief in her ability to navigate the path ahead. The music had returned to her life, and with it a world of possibility and hope. The night after the charity event, Lena returned to her apartment with a quiet sense of disbelief and wonder. She had expected to feel proud, of course, but the depth of emotion that lingered in her mind surprised her. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still feel the resonance of the grand piano under her fingers, the attentive silence of the audience, and the wave of applause that had washed over her like a warm tide. For the first time in years, she felt fully seen, as if a part of her that had been dormant had finally been acknowledged. Her phone buzzed with messages from people who had attended the event. Some were friends of Charles, some were strangers who had been captivated by her performance. They expressed their admiration, their astonishment, and in some cases their tears. Lena read each message carefully, a smile tugging at her lips and tears welling in her eyes. The responses were heartfelt, unfiltered, and sincere, unlike the polite compliments she had received in restaurants or small gatherings. This recognition was different. It felt genuine and transformative. Throughout the next morning, Lena felt a strange mix of exhaustion and energy. She went through her routine slowly, sipping her tea, preparing a simple breakfast, and organizing her small apartment. But her mind was alive with plans and possibilities. She kept thinking about the moment at the piano, the way the music had flowed naturally, and the way the audience had connected with it. It was more than just a performance. It was proof that she could reclaim a part of herself she had almost lost. At work, her coworkers greeted her with awe and curiosity. They had heard stories of her performance and wanted to know every detail. Lena spoke with quiet humility, sharing bits of the experience without exaggeration, letting her eyes light up with the joy she had felt. Their admiration was comforting, but it also reminded her that her life had changed. She wasn't just the waitress who served tables with grace and efficiency. She was a musician again, someone who could inspire and move people with her talent. Charles sent her a message mid-afternoon, inviting her to meet him for a brief discussion about future opportunities. Lena felt her heart skip a beat. She accepted, and later that evening she arrived at the venue, a little nervous but prepared. Charles greeted her warmly, his expression serious yet encouraging. "Lena," he began, "what you did last night was extraordinary. You didn't just play music. You told a story that moved everyone in that room. I've seen talented people before, but few can make an audience feel so deeply. I want to give you more opportunities to share your gift." Lena listened intently, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, her voice filled with emotion. "You don't have to say anything," Charles replied. "Actions will speak for themselves. There are events, performances, and collaborations I think you should consider. It won't be easy, but I believe you're ready." The conversation that followed was filled with plans, suggestions, and encouragement. Charles spoke of upcoming charity events, music festivals, and even private performances for influential patrons who could help her career flourish. Lena felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The opportunities were real, tangible, and life-changing, but they also came with responsibility and pressure. Yet the spark within her that had been reignited during her performance made the challenges seem manageable. In the days that followed, Lena began to explore these new possibilities. She met with event organizers, practiced with renewed focus, and refined her repertoire. Each interaction and rehearsal reinforced her confidence and reminded her of her capabilities. She found herself embracing the unpredictability of this new path, understanding that uncertainty could coexist with growth and fulfillment. Her personal life began to shift as well. Lena's confidence at work and in social interactions improved, and she carried herself with a quiet assurance that was noticeable to those around her. She started to envision a future where music wasn't just a fleeting passion, but a central part of her life. The idea of performing regularly, traveling to new venues, and sharing her art with wider audiences no longer seemed like a dream, but a real possibility. One afternoon, Lena received an unexpected call from a local radio station. The host had heard about her performance at the charity event and wanted to interview her about her journey and her music. Lena felt a mix of excitement and nerves, but agreed. The interview went smoothly, and her story reached people who might never have heard her play otherwise. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, reinforcing her belief that she was on the right path. Through it all, Lena remained grounded. She continued to work at the restaurant part-time, valuing the connection with her coworkers and the familiar routine it provided. But her evenings and weekends were now filled with practice, performances, and meetings related to her music. She learned to balance these aspects of her life, understanding that each part contributed to her growth and happiness. With each passing day, Lena noticed subtle changes within herself. She was more patient, more resilient, and more open to taking risks. She embraced challenges rather than fearing them, recognizing that every obstacle was an opportunity to learn and improve. Her music became a tool not only for expression but also for personal growth, allowing her to navigate the complexities of life with grace and confidence. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, Lena sat at her piano in the quiet of her apartment. She played softly, letting the music flow naturally without concern for perfection or judgment. It was a moment of reflection, a chance to reconnect with herself and her passion. As the final note lingered in the air, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had come far, yet she knew this was only the beginning. The journey ahead was full of possibilities and challenges. Lena understood that success would require dedication, courage, and resilience, but she also knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. Her music had returned to her life, bringing with it purpose, joy, and connection. The applause, the recognition, and the opportunities were significant, but the true reward was the rediscovery of herself and her ability to touch others through her art. As Lena prepared for the upcoming performances, she felt a sense of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had led her to this point. She understood that the road ahead would not always be smooth, but she embraced it with determination and hope. Her talent, once hidden behind the walls of routine and responsibility, was now a beacon guiding her toward a future filled with possibility, growth, and the fulfillment of her dreams. The day of Lena's first major solo performance arrived, and she woke with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The morning sunlight streamed through her apartment window, illuminating the small space she had grown so comfortable in. Every detail of her preparation felt important, from the choice of dress to the careful arrangement of sheet music on the piano. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had prepared for this moment, and that all the practice, rehearsals, and previous performances had led to this point. Arriving at the venue, Lena was struck by its grandeur. The stage was set with dramatic lighting, the audience seating arranged in a sweeping arc, and the air filled with a sense of anticipation. Volunteers and staff moved quickly, ensuring every detail was perfect. Lena felt her pulse quicken as she approached the piano. The same sleek black instrument that had first challenged her confidence now seemed familiar, almost like an old friend welcoming her back. Charles was waiting nearby, his presence a calming reassurance. He smiled warmly, nodding to her as if to say, "You've got this." Lena returned the smile, letting the brief exchange bolster her courage. She walked to the piano, took a seat, and let her hands rest lightly on the keys. A moment of stillness passed, a quiet pause before the music began, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then she played. The first notes flowed effortlessly, soft and tender, weaving through the space with emotional precision. Lena allowed herself to feel the music deeply, channeling every memory, every challenge, and every triumph she had experienced. Her fingers moved with elegance and confidence, dancing across the keys as the melody grew richer and more intricate. The audience was silent, captivated by the depth of feeling she conveyed. The notes spoke of hope, resilience, and the rediscovery of a dream long postponed. As the piece progressed, Lena lost herself in the music. Her heart synchronized with the rhythm, her mind focused entirely on the story each note carried. The audience was entranced, sensing the sincerity and vulnerability that emanated from her performance. Some closed their eyes, others leaned forward in their seats. All of them moved in ways words could not capture. Lena felt a profound connection to each listener, as if the music was a bridge between her world and theirs. Midway through the performance, she reached the emotional climax of the piece. Her fingers flew across the keys with passion, producing a swell of sound that filled the hall, resonating in the chests of everyone present. Lena's breath caught at the intensity, but she did not falter. Every note, every chord was deliberate, imbued with feeling and purpose. The audience's response was palpable. Their collective energy seemed to lift the music even higher, creating a moment that felt both intimate and universal. When the final notes faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then the hall erupted in applause. The clapping was thunderous, a wave of appreciation and awe that enveloped Lena. She rose from the piano, her eyes glistening with tears of joy and relief. She had faced her fears, embraced her talent, and shared her soul through music. The audience's reaction affirmed everything she had worked for, every long night, every moment of doubt, every challenge overcome. Charles approached, clapping enthusiastically, his face alight with pride. "You've done it," he said. "You've captivated them all." Lena smiled, the magnitude of her achievement settling in. It wasn't just about performing well. It was about reclaiming a part of herself, proving to herself that her dreams were valid and achievable. In the days that followed, Lena received messages and invitations from musicians, event organizers, and fans who had attended the performance. Each message reinforced the impact she had made and opened doors to new opportunities. She was asked to perform at additional events, collaborate with other artists, and even record pieces that could reach audiences far beyond her city. Lena felt a deep sense of gratitude, realizing that her courage had created a ripple effect, touching lives and inspiring others. Despite the newfound attention, Lena remained grounded. She continued to practice daily, refining her technique and exploring new pieces. She also maintained her connection with her co-workers at the restaurant, valuing the stability and familiarity it provided. Her life had expanded, but she understood the importance of balance and perspective. Each step forward in her career was meaningful, yet it was her personal growth and renewed confidence that felt most significant. One evening, after a successful performance, Lena returned to her apartment and sat at her piano. She played quietly, letting the music flow without pressure or expectation. It was a moment of reflection and peace, a chance to savor the journey she had undertaken. She thought of her mother, of the sacrifices made, of the challenges overcome, and of the dreams now within reach. Each note was a reminder of resilience, perseverance, and the power of embracing one's talent and passion. As Lena finished playing, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had reclaimed her music, her confidence, and her purpose. The journey had not been easy, but it had been transformative. The applause, recognition, and opportunities were important, but the true reward was the rediscovery of herself and the ability to connect with others through her art. Looking ahead, Lena felt a quiet determination. There would be more performances, more challenges, and moments of doubt, but she knew she had the strength to face them. Music was no longer a distant dream. It was her life, her voice, and her expression. With each performance, she would continue to grow, inspire, and share the story that had once been hidden behind the walls of fear and circumstance. In the glow of her apartment, Lena closed her eyes and let the final notes linger in the air. The journey had come full circle, and a new chapter was beginning. She had stepped into her power, embraced her talent, and found her voice. The applause outside might fade, but the music within her would continue, guiding her toward a future filled with possibility, connection, and the joy of sharing her gift with the world.